Hi everybody, welcome to the May 2021 edition of Frequency Freaks Workshop. I'm Paul. We have a great workshop lined up for you this month. Heidi is doing a special edition of the Gear Chronicles where she's looking at not just one, not just two, but count them, three new Eurorack modules, all coming from the Toronto area. And that's really exciting to see that we have this community of designers and builders here that's expanding. It's a wonderful thing. We also have a lot of performances from everybody in the community. That's you guys. And I just wanted to take a quick minute to remind you that we still have blank panels available, and we still have our shop at www.freakfreaks.com. Just look for the shop icon in the menu and click it, and you can get some cool swag. We've got t-shirts, we've got hoodies, we've got coffee mugs and stickers. Hopefully you can stay right through to the end, and we're looking forward to seeing you again in person soon, hopefully.
Hi everyone, this is the second episode of Gear Chronicles for Frequency Freaks, and this month I'm really excited to feature three of our very own local modular designers. We've got Jeff Lee from System80, who is going to introduce his new revised version of the Jove filter. We have Dakota Melin, a familiar name in our community, who's going to talk us through his original Filter Resonator module design. And we have Adam Fulford, a new designer in Toronto, who is going to introduce his stereo delay module, the Vino-Echo. This is, it's a nice Sunday morning, and I've got Adam Fulford from Toronto, who runs a new modular company, Venus Instruments, and I'm really happy to have him here to talk about his first Eurorack module, the Vino-Echo. So Adam, why don't you introduce yourself, how long you've been in modular, how long you've been programming things, how long you've been making music?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, thanks so much for having me on this and showcasing the module, and also for all of the great feedback that you've given me so far on it. That's been fantastic. Yeah, so I mean, I've been working on kind of DIY musical things for many years now. I'm a kind of from the guitar world with pedals was kind of where I started with it all. I don't know, I went through the phase of building every distortion fuzz pedal I could. I made some studio gear, and I made an amp, and I started kind of designing my own bits. And I'm relatively new to modular. I've only been doing it about a year and a half or so now. The music I've been hoping to make, and have been making in the past, I wasn't quite finding the modules that I wanted out there, or not necessarily ones I could afford anyway. And there's something really fun about creating the exact thing that you want. It doesn't get much better than that when it comes to DIYing. Is fantastic, getting a kit and firing it up for the first time is a real buzz. But if you kind of come up with an idea and go, oh, this is how I want it to work, and it doesn't, nothing else quite does it like this, and then realizing it, it's so fun. So the kind of music I was aiming to do is, and as I'm still working on my modular. Like the rack is still not. I haven't done any performances using modular yet. But this is essentially kind of ambient, I guess, music, combining mostly sample based, and
Cool.
I prefer to use samples of acoustic instruments. So I play the piano as well as the guitar, and so like recording it and mangling it using granular kind of processing and that kind of thing has always been, or not always, but it's what I'm getting into now anyway. Yeah.
So let's get right into the Vino-Echo or Veno-Echo. I don't know how you pronounce
Vino-Echo, yeah.
Vino-Echo. Let's talk about the main features of your module and what was your design inspiration. I know you had just mentioned that it was something, you wanted to create something that exactly, with the kind of features that you want. So take us through some of the main features of it.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it's not it by choice. I've tried to make it and not too complex an interface. Essentially, it's a pair of delay lines, the pair of echoes, which have independent time controls, independent feedback. So the ability to there's the switch in the middle there allows you to change between a synced time between the two, or just like a free continuous control on each dial, and that led me to think, well, let's put tap tempo in there. Definitely from my guitar pedal kind of experience.
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. I love the idea of just being able to kind of tap it a few times to get what you want out of it. So when you're in sync mode, the dial becomes a ratio of the bass tempo.
right.
So the tap button is in the middle there at the bottom,
Yeah,
and that blinks at the bass tempo rate.
yeah.
And yeah, as you've got it now, the two time knobs are at noon, so they're both blinking at the same rate as the bass.
Yeah.
So if you go there to the left, then it becomes faster. So it will become a multiplication of the bass tempo, and if you go to the right, it will divide it.
But also, you've got the wet dry control here, the stereo width, which is really cool. You can get some really nice effects with playing with the width because there's a CV input for the width, and then you've got this cross feedback and filter crossfade. Now I played with it. I know what it sounds like. I don't know exactly know what it does, but it sounds really great. And also, I'd like you to go through also the built-in filter, which is really nice as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I'll just say before we get to those features, like the main goal of the design was to make a delay which I could, both channels could be completely independent if desired. And also, every time you make a change to the delay time, it doesn't have any artifacts. So it doesn't do. I mean, I know it's cool. Like when you get a delay, especially an old analog delay, and you wind it back to a low tempo, and it changes pitch. It's the Doppler effect, right? The moving source versus the listener. So it's really cool, but it has limited application, I would say. If you want to do like the end of a Radiohead song or whatever, then it's perfect. But if you want to be a bit more like, I would say it allows the delay to be a bit more granular, because you can go from a really quick time to a really slow time, and you don't get any pitch shifting. It just the buffer is played at a different speed. So that was one of my main goals. And the other thing was to have a huge delay range. That's the other thing I needed to get out of it. I can't remember what I ended up with now. 36 seconds, I think, the max delay time. So it's basically a looper at that point, like a lot, well, more than a looper, like a sample phrase recorder or something. Okay. So the two filters. So it has a high pass filter and a low pass filter. They're on the wet line only, and the filter cutoff for each of those is access where you can configure, and there's also a resonance in the background. So it's just it's a digital filter design. And it has some character built into it as well. It kind of saturates slightly as you get higher. And what's cool about it is because it's in the feedback loop. So you get that dubby like effect when if you have it as a high pass filter, it will filter the echo and it'll filter it again and again and again. So you get this kind of trailing off into a high frequency kind of material. Or alternatively, you can go analog delay, like an echo man or whatever the Bucket Brigade style delays, where the top end is cut out, and so it becomes murkier and darker as the echoes disappear away.
Like you said, it's got a really nice character to it, and because you've got a knob where you can bring in the filter or not, then you have a really great manual control of when you want that saturation, that filter feedback. So on to the cross feedback.
Yeah, right? So the cross feedback,
which is
and I just realized this because I have this panel in front of me, which is a previous design, and it doesn't have that knob on it. So there's no wonder I forgot it existed. So so the cross feedback is it's basically when you have a delay line, but essentially it's a buffer, it's an audio buffer, and you literally listen to it at a delayed period of time, right? So and if you've got no feedback whatsoever, it will just be one repeat, just here's the main signal and here's the loaded one, like an amount of time behind. With a feedback, you send the delay line back into the input, and that's what so it's kind of like the amount of repeats. So the cross feedback, it sends that feedback signal into the other channel. So the left will be sending it to the right, and the right will be sending it to the left. And so essentially, the more you go, if you're at noon, then it's like 50-50 going to both. And if you're fully counterclockwise, then the two channels are completely isolated. And if you're over the other way, fully clockwise, then you've got all of the repeats from one side only happening in the other ear. The only other feature I don't think I've mentioned yet is the reverse buttons.
Reverse buttons, and also there's the internal modulation source.
Yes, right, yes. Yeah. So the reverse buttons, I took a slightly different stance to reverse than maybe some other modules take. So it has a parallel reverse buffer. Okay, so the input is either coming from the dry input plugged into the input jacks, or that is being separately in parallel recorded into another buffer, which is then played backwards. So as you hit a reverse button, the input to the delay lines becomes that reverse signal. So this allows you to get some quite interesting kind of overlapping of forward and reverse, and because you can just trigger it anytime you like. The reason to have it parallel is so that there's always signal in it. Right, because if it wasn't parallel, if you hit it, it would have nothing in there to play back. So I wanted it always to be able to just immediately come in with something reversed. Yeah. And as you maybe could probably tell from the kind of music I mentioned I make, I was mostly interested in creating kind of asynchronous, not the sync was a secondary feature for me entirely. I like to keep it on the free mode, and then
Yep.
Arbitrarily change when it's going forward or backwards. Arbitrarily change what tempo each of the sides are doing. So just to give you that kind of
Yeah.
kind of almost random texture to the repeats.
What is the availability of the module at this moment, and what's the ETA if folks are interested?
Yeah, so it's technically released. I took a first pre-order, so that is now, like, the first pre-order is now closed. They're being built currently, and so the PCBs are being fabricated. It is I'm selling it both as a fully built module and also as a DIY kit. So you can have the option of getting the bare PCBs, the PCBs with populated SMD for people who aren't happy to tackle like the really teeny parts, and also, yeah, as I say, a fully built module. So it's basically at this point, early on in this kind of endeavor. It's just as and when there's interest, right? So it's been really nice. Actually, the first set of people, it's been quite a lot of people just kind of jumped on it and said, "Oh, that looks cool. I'm going to give it a go," which was, I was hoping that people would. So if you're interested, please get in touch. My email address, venusinstrumentsaudio@gmail.com. And I'll add you to the second pre-order, and then I can't really guarantee when it'll be available next, but yeah, they're small batches. So when maybe 25 people or whatever get in touch, then I'll make a new order.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, and really looking forward to the constant tweaking of this module, and also future releases of Venus Instruments. So
thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Cheers, Heidi.
So thanks, Jeff, for spending some time with me today to go through your update of the very popular Jove filter. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Let's tell us a little bit about System80 and the Jove revision that you've made.
Sure, yeah. So System80, I feel like people in Toronto know us, know me, because I've done a couple of presentations at the Toronto Sound Festival over the last few years. So the royal we is just me and a technician, Eric, who works here at Relab. And we're both very part-time, so we kind of don't even add up to one whole person. And kind of System80 specialty is really sort of like vintage analog designs from the 70s and early 80s. That's kind of how I got into the synthesis and what I love. So I'm sort of really interested in bringing those designs into the Eurorack format, so people can enjoy them without necessarily having to spend thousands of dollars on a vintage synth. So our very first product has been our most successful product. It's called Jove. It was a 14 HP multi-mode filter that is based on the multi-mode filter that's in the Roland Jupiter 6 polysynth, which was made in the early 80s. And I've covered this before, so this is a bit repetitive, but sort of the big and interesting thing to me, at least, about the Jove is that it's a Roland filter, so it's a OTA-based filter, 4 stages. But what's interesting to me and very unique about it is that it's a multi-mode filter. So if you look at all the classic Roland synths like the SH-101, their sort of whole family of analog polysynths, and the monosynths of their era, they're almost all just low pass filters, typically 24 dB per octave. Then the Jupiter 6 came out and it had a multi-mode filter. So it added a high pass and a band pass mode. And to my ears, those modes are really interesting. The low pass mode still retains a lot of that sort of rubbery, plasticky character of the classic Roland filters of that era. But then you get these 2 extra modes that are just really distinctive, I guess I would say. That's like, they're still very Roland sounding, but they're to me, they're really interesting. And during the design phase, I found it quite, it was a very close match to the original, because I actually had 2 Jupiter 6s that I was using during testing. So there's a lot of filters in Eurorack, and Jove, I think, captures quite accurately the kind of feel and character of the original Jupiter 6 filter, which allows you to just have one of those voices in Eurorack if you want to do like a subtractive analog voice with that filter, or run anything else through it. So a couple of years ago, we released an 8 HP version of Jove, which we called the 860, because all of our other modules are part of what I call the 800 series. So we started with the 850, which is a LFO sort of utility module, the 810, which is a analog voice module, the 820, which is just an analog VCO, and then the 880, which is our Eurorack analog drum machine. So Jove, even though it was our first product, kind of became an outlier by virtue of not having an 8 in front of its name. So 860 was the first version. We called it 860, and it was 8 HP. And so we only made 30 of them, and they sold out immediately. And then I set to work on making sort of a replacement for both of them. And that's what we now call the 860 Mark II. And it is 10 HP. It recalls the filter mode between power cycles, and it has a 2-channel mixer on it. So the original Jove and the 860 Mark I, you had one attenuated audio channel, and then you had an unattenuated channel. So you could create a 2-channel mix, but you would have to, if you need to attenuate with another module if you were clipping or peaking.
It's really nice to have 2 inputs with mix control in a filter, you know.
And
you can easily put in a chord, right? Like
exactly.
chord.
And the reason why I did that is because, again, it comes from this classic monosynth or polysynth design of that era, where a lot of synths were 2 oscillator synths. So a lot of the Roland, like the Jupiter 6 was a 2 oscillator per voice synth. So you needed to mix two signals into the filter. So it sort of made sense that because then you can detune them, and or you can add in a noise source or anything else, right? So and it doesn't take up a huge amount of real estate on the panel, and it's sort of saves some space because then you don't have to necessarily have an external mixing module.
Yeah. The other thing, there's a reason why I don't have the module in a case. It's because, you know, sharing a workspace with Jeff, I've learned how meticulous he is as a designer. And the really beautiful thing about this module is it's got a really nice enclosure for the back, which I'm sure a lot, you know, some users will appreciate. But do you want to talk a little bit about this?
that was a bit of an extravagance.
It's extravagant, but it's great.
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
So really the credit there is due to Rabbit Elephant. So you know, Rabbit Elephant, they're known for the natural gate. That's a beautifully designed module that not many people have actually seen in the wild, because they're so rare and hard to find because people want them so badly. I've seen one in real life, and there's just the detail that goes into the panel, and the knobs and the layout and everything. Like it's amazing. But then they went to the trouble of putting a stainless steel cover on the back. And so I was talking to my machinist who does our front panels, and I said, you know, can we do something similar? Like, can I put a cover on the back just to give the module a more finished feel? And partly because my favorite modular format is the Roland System 100M, and it's not a 5U format. It's not a Eurorack format. It's sort of in between. They're tall modules, but they're all fit the same width, and they work only within the one System 100M system. But they use mini jacks, 3.5 millimeter jacks. To me, it's just like 5U is too big, Eurorack is too small. The System 100M format is like just the right size, and all the modules, they're meant to be kind of be taken out and swapped around, but they all have an enclosure on the back. So that was also what inspired this. And it's just, I realized sort of, you see a lot of stuff, the way people use their systems, and there's some people will set it up and just leave it forever. But I feel like the default is that people swap modules around a lot. Sometimes you have to have your module powered on because you need to calibrate it. You know, if there's any sort of adjustments you need to do on it, you have to have it out of the case but powered on. So I just thought users might be more comfortable handling the module and moving it around between cases if the electronics on the back weren't exposed.
I know that the 860 is currently, it's been released, and it's also all sold out. So can we talk a little bit about the availability and what's coming up next?
So they sold out within a week, which surprised me. Clearly there's a lot of pent up pandemic demand, I think, because we had not had Jove in production for over a year, and we had been teasing this sort of narrower version of it with some new features. So the people that were waiting maybe for a Jove, they jumped on getting an 860. So it's completely out of stock everywhere. We are struggling to make more because there is I don't know if any of your other manufacturers have discussed this, but there's a global semiconductor shortage that's related to the pandemic, as well as the fire at a factory or something. So it's pretty serious, especially for small players. If we rely, because a lot of the Eurorack makers that I know, we source all our parts through North American or European distribution systems. So we rely on like Mouser and DigiKey and other sort of domestic distributors, I guess. So they import all their parts from Asia, and then they sell them to us. So they have very good quality control. You don't have to worry about counterfeits. They are running out of semiconductors. So the 860, a couple of the parts that were they're in full production. There's something you would never ever dream of there being a shortage of them. And then when I went to put together the bill of materials for the next run of 860s, they're just gone. like, an op amp that's used in, probably 80% of all your rack modules in the footprint that I need to use it in. It's just completely out of stock across all global supply chains. So we had to make some changes. We had to just find parts that we could actually use. They're the same part, but just in a different format. So we had to redesign the circuit board, and we're currently validating it. So we're probably not going to have more for at least another 2 or 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I have to tide people over is when we did the 860 in black, I also had my machinist do 50 of them in sort of what I would call System 100M gray. So I can show one off here.
Please do.
My friend Bart, he hand screen prints our boxes. So they've got a very kind of nice crafty feel to them, and I really like them. And we decided to do these special edition ones in pink. And inside you get, it's the exact same as the black 860, except that the panel is gray. So it has the back.
And it's very System 100.
It's very
gray.
System 100.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect color match, but it's definitely gray. And then the other nice touch that I like about it is that it has these orange indicators on the knobs, which were a special order. I know I'm a sort of nerd about synth knobs, and so I was really excited when I sourced these because I had to special order them from the knob manufacturer. So I don't know if we'll do any other of our modules in this color, but we're about to release these next week. They're going to be for sale direct from the System80 website, and we have Juno Records in the UK is going to be distributing these for the European market, and that's it. So buy direct from System80, or anyone in Europe, they got to get them from Juno.
I think it's just a solid design that doesn't have too much, but it has enough to do a lot of different things. And I do agree the different filter types are really great. I really like the high pass.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, the high pass sounds really nice when you put it all the way up. Yeah.
Yeah, it rolls right off. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yes, thank you, Heidi.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot.
All right, take care.
Hi, Dakota. Thanks so much for meeting up and talking about your new Filter Resonator module design.
Yeah, just looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a great module. I have a prototype of it right here, and we're gonna be listening to it as we're chatting through it. So let's get right to it. Tell us about the design background, the inspiration for the filter, and how you came upon this particular design and concept.
So the beginning of the design was very much the ARP 1047 SVF, which is found in the big 2500 ARP synthesizer. It's kind of one of the first really high Q SVFs that could do really high Q without self-oscillating, without it wasn't meant to color the audio. It was meant as a really refined subtractive tool. I mean, it did color the audio because it was all made out of transistors, and it's pretty crunchy, the original.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really loved some pieces that I'd heard by an artist named Eliane Radige, which I hope I'm saying it right. And she used the 1047 module specifically at very high Q to kind of like pull harmonics out of complex audio. And it's kind of like an extreme subtractive tool to find the little arpeggios and harmonies and stuff that exist inside more complex audio, and it fascinated me.
the main unique feature of this filter is that there are 3 different signal inputs that interacts with the filter in different ways. And so I'm going to have you go through those 3 different inputs and what they do.
Yeah, so there's 3 inputs. There's a main input with an associated gain knob, which can trim the input of that, of your main input. And then there are 2 limited or automatic gain compensating inputs. One is a static limit input that the amount that it attenuates your input is linked directly to how high your Q is, either by the knob setting or by CV input. But it won't react to the actual input amplitude. It won't react to, at certain settings, the filter can amplify things like to the rails, huge. So that the limit input will not react to things clipping or overcoming it or anything like that. The other input, the AGC input, is the kind of the new thing that I came up with through talking to a couple different people. And it really, it was that patch that Eliane did. She did, like, I was reading about her process, and it's incredible. Like, she would just multi-track over and over and over again and layer all of the things and take all the best takes. And basically it was just incredible amounts of practice to like dial in all those perfect little points. And the AGC input on this is a attempt to make that a little bit easier to dial in. And what it does is it's a compressor on the front end of the filter that is side chained or controlled by what's coming out of the filter. So if the filter core is amplifying something past a certain threshold, it automatically is turning down your input in kind of a balancing act to try and keep everything evened out all the time.
In addition to all these really interesting design choices around the resonance and the limiting and the compression, you also call this a resonator module. So there's also a percussion section with its own resonance control. And there is, a couple of inputs that are not usually found in filters, is a trigger input and a gate input. So my understanding is the trigger is for pinging the filter, right? In essence. Yeah.
So the trigger input, anything that passes a threshold of about 1.5 volts is automatically conditioned into a strong pulse signal to kind of strike the filter. So it's like a strike or a ping. On the ARP 1047, they called it a trigger input. So that's what I've called it. The gate input, when percussion mode is active, the gate input acts like a switch that's operated by your gate voltage being high or low. And on the ARP 1047, the idea was that you'd plug in your trigger, your gate, and your volt per octave signals, all from your keyboard. The trigger input would ping the filter. When you were holding a key down, the gate high, you could set your resonance of the filter when you're holding a key very high so that it would activate it and ring. Then when you let go of the key, you could have a second resonance level that would be active as soon as you let go. and that would kind of be your either gating it and it would just shut it off, or if your resonance is kind of midway, it ends up being kind of a decay time.
Yep.
And it's just the natural decay of the resonant filter. So when the percussion mode is on, you plug in all your signals and you can use it as kind of a sine voice, and it's very useful for percussion, which I assume that's why they call it percussion mode, because as soon as you plugged it in, it just wants to be a drum.
The resonance on this filter, like you said, can be really high or very strong, and yet it doesn't, on its own, it doesn't self oscillate, because you have to patch it to in order to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So a classic SVF, state variable filter circuit, if it's built properly and there hasn't been anything added to make it self-oscillate, it should never self-oscillate, because it's like the original paper that the designer of the ARP 1047 wrote was the name of the paper is basically the unchangeably stable filter. And it was, and the stability of the filter was what he was focusing on, to try and make it I haven't talked to him. I think he's passed away before I got into synthesizers, but it looks from like the paper that he really wanted to build a clean tool for processing more complex audio, and he didn't want it to color the audio too much. So that's what I tried to do with a little bit more modern parts with this one, and tried to get that same extreme high Q, so you can really reduce your bandwidth and really narrow in on like a single little slice of audio. But you do need an input audio for anything to happen. If there's no input, then there's nothing for the filter to process, and you don't get an output. Thing I noticed halfway through working on this thing is, because the AGC input is a reactive input. If you plug the bandpass into the AGC input, it will kind of automatically compensate for things running away, and it will just kind of keep things stable. So that's one thing that this filter does that the 1047 can't, unless you've got a lot of patience. To set it up to the perfect spot.
Yeah. Oh, one last thing before we sign off is the availability of this module. I know that, I've got a prototype, you've got one, and I know that right now there's a bit of a worldwide shortage of electronic parts. So what's the availability of this, or what's your ETA?
So this module, to hit the performance that it's capable of. It does use some pretty specific parts, and unfortunately, some of them are victims of the current shortage worldwide. Things should be in stock in 2 months, but I've already been told that before, that everything was going to be in stock in 2 months. So I mean, I guess basically it's I'm going to do the best I can, and people will know when they're going to be available. And it hasn't been all terrible to kind of delay it, because there's been some new, you know, as folks I talk to about design and some of the technical stuff and bounce ideas off of, as I've been able to show them the prototype, we've come up with some other ways to improve things. So it's not all bad. I mean, when it actually can be built and there's parts to build them, it's going to be an improved version. So I'm not getting too depressed about it, but I also wish I could just build things.
Well, I'm looking forward to finishing this segment and all the demos, and then sending it back to you to get it enhanced and revised, and getting it back and playing with it some more. So thanks, Dakota. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for going through it.
think is cool. If you're explaining something to someone, there's a reason why you're doing it. Either you think it's super important, very, very interesting. And the more that you can convey that to someone, the more likely they are to remember it and kind of get some value from it. And you can do this in many ways. One way is just to show your enthusiasm for the subject. Another way is to show, using examples, how it's relevant to their lives. So, for example, quantum physics, every time you turn on your phone, you're invoking the fundamental laws of the universe to do your bidding.
Sa